Hello everyone, welcome to Practical C++ Programming. My name is Zach, and in this tutorial we will be discussing file input. Now, as with file output, the first thing we need to do is include the right library, and that's going to be the same library, file stream, fstream. And then we also need to declare a file handle that we are going to be inputting in using the ifstream declaration. So in output stream we use OF stream. In input stream we're going to use IF stream for input file stream. Now the difference is in input we need to already have a file specified that we're reading from. You know, you don't want the file to be empty. You want to have a file that has data in it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use names.txt from the last tutorial, and I'll go ahead and open it real quick so that we can add some data. We're going to use names such as we'll use Zach, Troy, Sam, Jim, Mark, and Kristen, and Margaret, Taylor, Jake, and Sherry, and Francis as the names for our we're just going to basically make a name list. So these are all names, and let's say we're wanting to read these names in from this file and store them in a variable. So to do that, we need to know the name of the file and declare a file. So we'll say input file, and we need to declare the name of the file that we're reading from, which was names.txt. So we're reading from names.txt. And as with the output file, we just need to go ahead and say if not input file, cout file not found end line, and let's return a value like -6 so that we know it wouldn't be found. And let's go ahead and run it, and we got process return 0. So names.txt was found, and it should be because it has been created with all these names in it. And remember, this is just a cautionary thing, so if your file for some reason comes up missing, it'll return -6, and you'll know that it's gone. And this is, again, just a practical way to code your program to look for errors and problems with the code. So moving on, let's go ahead and create something to store these names in. And if you want to think about, you know, the things that we've gone over, probably the perfect thing that we could use is a data structure such as an array, and we can just make one variable, one array, and then store all the names in that array. And so to do that, what we'll do is we'll say, you know, one thing about an array is that you could have an unknown number of names here. And obviously, if that was the case, you would probably want to use a different data structure. But since this is a beginner's course, we're going to go ahead and use an array, and we're going to assume that we know how many names are in the file. If I teach an advanced course, but you know, kind of depending on how well this one does, if I teach an advanced course, we're going to definitely go into more advanced data structures and a better way to store this data whenever, you know, the amount of names is not known. But like I said, for now we're going to go ahead and assume that we know how many names are going to be on this list. So let's count them up. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's 11 names. So let's go ahead and declare a constant value, constant int size equals 11. And we'll use that for the size of our list, okay? And then let's go ahead and make an array. Like I said, I like to do, it's kind of a convention to declare your arrays at the beginning of the function. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to declare the array, and it's going to hold string values because these are all string values, alphanumeric, multiple character values. So we're going to use a string, and we'll say names list. We're going to hold size for the value, and we're just going to declare it just like that. As actually, I think the better way to do that would say equal, and then brackets, and then just do that, just like that. And if we run that, that should not give us an error, and it doesn't. And the reason why is because code blocks and most IDEs will see this as, instead of having to basically do empty strings 11 times to declare this array, if you just put one empty string in there, code blocks goes ahead and assumes to set all the default values to this, an empty string, which is what we want. We want the strings to start out empty so that we can put new ones in their place later. So that's basically, we're initializing this array to a bunch of empty string values. That being said, let's go ahead and get to where we can read in these these file names. And to do that, the best way to do it is with a pre-read and a post-read within a while loop. And you can play with this you want and kind of figure out the best way that you see fit, but when you do it with this while loop, you're going to realize that the pre-read and post-read is actually the best way to go about it, because oftentimes if you don't use a pre-read and if you don't do a post-read, you're going to figure out that either you're going to read the last name twice or you won't read the first name at all. And so that's why I like to use this strategy to read from text files. And I'll show you exactly what I mean in a second. So beginning with the pre-read, this is going to be the pre-read, and we'll go ahead and comment that. We'll say pre-read. And if you didn't know, I know we haven't discussed this yet in any of the other tutorials, to comment code, you just use double backslash, and that will comment code. So if I write double backslash, I can write whatever I want, and it won't affect the code at this point. So to kind of keep track of what you're doing, it might be a good idea to actually comment your code, especially when you get to pre-reads and post-reads, because it'll make it easier to read when you go back and look at it. So starting with the pre-read, you're going to use the file handle, which was input file, and then you're going to use the input stream operator, which is greater than, if you remember CN operator. And then you're going to store the name, the string from names.txt. Sorry, I got my words twisted there for a second. You're going to store the string taken from this file into a variable declared here. Now it's not advised to put this straight into an array. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say string temp name, and we're just going to leave it like that, and we're going to put it into a variable called temp name. So the first time it reads, it's going to read Zach, and it's going to store it here into temp name. Okay. Now let's make a while loop, and this will all make sense after we're done coding it, and you'll see why. So then we make a while loop, and we say while not input file .eof parentheses, and this .eof is a function, and we'll go over more with functions in the next tutorial, but it stands for end of file. So basically this condition says while input file is not at the end of its file. So basically when it reads through, the cursor starts here, and as we read through it, the cursor is going to move like this all the way down through this file as this while loop continues until the cursor gets to here at the end of Francis, and that's considered an end of file because there's no more text in this file. And as long as it's not at the end of the file, this while loop is going to keep looping. So that's why I like to use for my loop. And while it's not at the end of file, go ahead and hit enter a few times, comment post read, and we're going to say do the same thing as the pre-read, just temp name. And this right here, this pre-read, this post-read, and this while loop is your basic setup for file input. And I know right now you're saying that is really complicated, it doesn't make sense, but this is the best way to receive input from a file. And you'll see why. I want you to play with it and see if you can figure out a better way to do it. But I think once you play with it for a while, you're going to realize that this is definitely the cleanest way to receive receive text from an input file. So let's go ahead and continue on. And you always want the post read to be the last thing in your while loop, and your pre-read to be the first thing, or the last thing before your while loop. So you never want anything in between your while loop, like right here, and your pre-read, and you never want anything in between your post-read and the end of your while loop right here. And that's just a golden rule for file input. So, but anything that you want to do, you know, data processing wise, can go in between here, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're basically going to say input, or we're going to say, how about this? The name was names list, so we'll say names list. And let's go ahead and declare an integer value. So we'll say int index equals 0. We're going to say names list index, so it's going to start at the first value in names list equals temp name, and then we'll say index plus plus. And what that's going to do is it's going to go through each name in this file. It's going to start with Zach, and it's going to start at index 0, go to the first index in names list, and it's going to store Zach because Zach is being held in temp name. And then it's going to add one to index. It's going to do the post read. It's going to go back up to the top of this while loop, and it's going to put the next name on the list, Troy, into our array. And if you don't believe me, we're going to hit run. You'll get no errors and nothing happened. So as of right now, there's no output, but I promise you it just populated the whole array, our whole names list array, with the names in this file. And to prove it to you, we're going to use a for loop on the outside of this while loop. So we're going to say for int, we'll just call it I equals to 0, I less than size, I plus plus, and then we're just going to go through this this loop and prove to you that names list is populated with the names in our names.txt file. So we'll say names list I into line, and if we run this now, it's going to output our array. And right now it just says Francis. So let's take a look at what went wrong there. So something's going wrong with our names.txt. So we have Francis here. Maybe, I believe it has something to do with the way we declared this array with this empty string. So let's see if we take this out, if that will fix it real quick. Let's hit run, and it still says Francis. So we're having an issue with our array declaration, because I know for a fact we're getting the input file and we're storing it in temp name, and then we're using the index to there's our problem right there. So obviously if index is at the beginning of the while loop, then, and we're declaring it to 0, then each time this while loop runs, it's going to set index back to 0. So what we need to do is we need to take this index equals 0 out and put it on the outside of our while loop. That way it's only declared to 0 once. Now when we run our program, we will get all the names in our list. That was a minor mistake. Obviously it completely changed the output of the program, and so you really got to look out for that stuff. And if you didn't really get the mistake, like I said, we had index equals 0 at the top of our while loop, so every time this loop ran, it was setting index back to 0, which is why it has to be on the outside of our while loop. But I think you should definitely go through this program several times, because when I first started C++, I found file input is a pretty complicated topic. So go through this program in this tutorial several times, practice the pre-read and the post-read, and I promise you when you get it down, it will make a whole lot of sense, and it'll just be another thing to you. It'll be very simple. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned.